Welcome to the Joe Verdi program, How to Follow Up and Prospect. In this series, Joe is going to talk with you about how you can sell more cars, increase growth, and ensure your success in today's competitive market. Before we get started with this tape, let's review how you can get the most out of your class with Joe. First, if you're serious about selling more cars, take good notes. If everyone doesn't have a pencil and paper, pause the tape now and get them. Second, let everyone else at the dealership know you're serious about your sales training class. Ask your receptionist to take messages, and hang a Do Not Disturb sign on the door if you have to. Joe's going to cover a lot of information, and he's going to cover it quickly, so hold your questions and comments until the end of this segment or until your manager stops the tape. And now, here's Joe.
How'd you guys like to eliminate all the things you dislike about selling cars? What if you could do that and also raise your commission per unit by at least $150 a unit? And what if all that wasn't a highball? What if there was a quick and easy way you could do this? What if I could show you a system to guarantee your long-term success? You know, if you're going through our tapes in series, you've been through phase one. Now in phase one, we got you more organized. You got your planner. Hopefully you're using it. If you're using the planner, you've got a basic tracking program in place. Your daily plan is starting to come together. You know what your appointments you have today. You know the things that you need to do. We also talked about the basics on that series, and you're hopefully giving everybody a good presentation, good demonstration. So you've got the foundation of selling down in phase one. Phase two, we talked about closing. We talked about handling objections. We talked about staying off price. Now you've got dozens of ways to close the sale without standing out there saying, if we can work it out today the way you want to buy it, can we sell you guys a car? You know how to handle the objections instead of dropping the price. And now you're handling that price and getting away from it. So now you're able to deal with people in that professional level. Now, in this series, we want to talk about taking that next step because everything we've talked about so far is to sell a car today. Presentations, demonstrations, so you can sell a car today. Close, so you can sell a car today. Handle objections, so you can sell it today. Negotiate, so you can sell it today. We want to talk about our long-term success. And you know, when I started selling cars, my first day on the showroom floor, I was taught basically everything I was ever taught about prospecting for the first 5 years. My first day on the showroom floor, my manager said, okay, guys, gather around. They gave us that quick training program. They said, there's the new car lot, and there's the used car lot. And then they said, okay, let's have some fun and do some prospecting. I didn't know anything. I had had no training. I'd never been in sales before in my life, and the manager said, let's have some fun. And he pulled out the white pages to the phone book, and he said, here, you guys, and they hired 3 of us all the same day. They said, I want you guys to start dialing numbers through the phone book. They said, just pick a number, call them, see if they'd like to buy a new car from you. I said, okay, I didn't know any better. And I picked up the phone, and I let my fingers do the walking there, and I dialed this first number. Now, 25 years ago, when I started selling cars, the big 3 made good cars, and we didn't have much competition. There wasn't Toyota, Lexus, Infiniti, or any of those others, hardly, to speak of. The big 3 made good cars, but they didn't stay together very well. And I didn't know that, and I dialed this first number, and I called this lady, and I said, hi, my name's Joe. I work at the dealership on the corner. Would you like to buy a new car from us? And she just ripped my head off. She said, I already bought a car from you guys. She said, my doors and my engine have already fallen out, and I've already been through your service department 27 times. She said, I hate my car, I hate your dealership, and I hate you too, and if you ever call me again, I'm going to call the police. Now, Glenn said it's going to be fun, and that didn't sound like that much fun to me. And I don't know about you, but I didn't want to have that much fun 10 times a day. So my first day on the showroom floor, I also learned to lie to my manager. He came up to us a few hours later, or whatever it was, and he said, did you guys make those calls? And I said, uh-huh. And every time this little project came up, I learned to lie again. I hated it, but I'm not going to do that. There was so much rejection. Why would you want to call somebody and have them yell at you all morning? Thanks, but no thanks. I wasn't very interested in that. And it was a long time before I ever learned how to sell. My first 5 years, if you've heard some of these stories on the other tapes, you know that I was just a typical good old boy selling cars, and I made good money for a 10 or 12 car a month salesman. I was generally the top salesman. I learned to say, if I could, would you? I learned how to drop the price, and I worked 12 and 14 hours a day. I dealt with all the strangers who pulled on the lot that don't like you, know you, or trust you. I spent my days out there trying to grind out a deal. Either that or we were standing in the huddle out there with a cup of coffee in our hands, smoking cigarettes, waiting for the next customer to show up. There was a lot of negative stuff in that huddle. We talked about why we couldn't be more successful. We talked about the market, the weather, the economy. We had a list of all the reasons why we couldn't sell more cars and make more money. And when we finally dealt with a customer, it was a hard to deal with customer. I got out of the car business after 5 years because I didn't like the hours. I got tired of those 12 and 14-hour days. I didn't like the money that went with the hours, and I couldn't stand the people that I was dealing with. Other than that, it's pretty good business. Now, when I got out of the car business, I opened that pinstriping company, and I used to see the pinstriper out there, and I said, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And I decided I was going to sell my pinstripes retail. And I went down to the bookstore after I opened my company. I was going to buy a book on advertising and a log book to keep up with the money I was going to make. And I went in there, and if you've heard some of the other tape sets, you know that I got bogged down and I started learning more about selling. And I bought about 120 or 30 books and tapes and went to seminars in the next couple of years. And I learned a lot more about how to sell and how to close. But one of the most important things I learned was about how to follow up and how to prospect. My follow-up experience my first 5 years was practically none because my manager also told me the wrong thing about that. He said, I can remember him repeating it over and over and over again. He said, there's no such thing as a be-back. Well, if there's no such thing as a be-back, there's no point in me doing any follow-up then. So I never did any follow-up to speak of. The follow-up that I heard about in the car business was to make a phone call, every 3 days after you sell a car or something like that, call them within a week, send them a thank you note, send them a birthday card or an anniversary card, and do that for a while, whatever that was. And I never did any follow-up the first 5 years. My prospecting was in a one-day shot. And when I was at the bookstore, I bought that book on advertising, and I was reading books on sales. And if you read a book on selling, in one of the chapters, chapter 7, 8, or 9, whatever it is, there's always going to be a chapter on prospecting and follow-up because you've got to find new customers, and you have to learn to stay in touch with the ones that you have. Building that repeat business is your secret to long-term success. And I was reading this book on selling, and I got to chapter 9. It was talking about follow-up. And I was reading this other book over here on advertising. And I realized that these were almost the same. The chapter on follow-up was almost the same as the book on advertising. And I started comparing follow-up to advertising, and I realized follow-up is advertising. The only difference is it's advertising on an individual basis. And then I wanted to find a quick and easy system I could use. I got back in the car business, and I wanted to sell a lot of cars, I wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to do it the easy way. And I created a follow-up program based on what I learned from insurance professionals, real estate professionals, and other professionals in sales in all kinds of fields. I based it on what I learned about advertising. And we're going to talk about some of the secrets and some of the things that make advertising and follow-up work together when we get into the series further. To kind of cut the story short, I got back in the car business. Now, I got back in and I had some better selling skills, no question about it. I learned how to sell and I learned how to close. I decided to come to work, and that's real important. I also came back in with a great attitude. I got rid of that stinking thinking that Zig Ziglar talks about all the time, and I decided to go to work, and I was going to be successful. So I had all that right, and then I also decided to set up a good, solid customer base for the future to guarantee me sales. I don't care how good you get at closing. We covered that in phase 2. You can become a dynamite closer, but if you don't have somebody to talk to, you're still not going to make any money. On this series, I want to share some of the things that I learned and the things that we teach in our 3-day class. And I can't tell you how easy it's going to be. You've got to trust me on this one. Listen to this tape series with an open mind. Take notes as we go along. Don't try to get ahead of yourself. Try to realize that prospecting is easy. In fact, if you listen to the tape set on closing, if I explained closing right, it sounded too easy to work. That's because it is easy. How hard should it be to sell somebody a car that came to buy it? That shouldn't be that difficult. How hard should it be to set a customer up for the future and build a future customer as a salesperson in this business since nobody else does a good job? That shouldn't be that hard. Customers would love to find somebody they like, trust, and respect in this business so they can see them again and again because they have to buy cars again and again. Basically, we're going to break this tape set down into 3 topics. We're going to give you some general information here in the very beginning. We're going to talk about follow-up and prospecting, why they work, the similarities between it and advertising. But we're going to break it down to 3 steps, prospecting. And when we talk about prospecting, there's only 3 ways to do it. Either in person, or you're doing it by mail, or you're running an ad in the newspaper, or you're going to do it by telephone. Now, if we're going to do it by mail, we need to learn the places, the best ways to do it by mail. The best places to advertise by mail, some sample target groups we'll call them. We need to talk about what to send, when to send it. We need to talk about what to do next after the mail out. If we're talking about by telephone, we need to go over the same thing. There's some real easy groups to telephone prospect with. They're right there at your fingertips. They already like you. So it's not a cold prospect, it's a warm prospect. And you have so many warm prospects in your life, I'm not really going to suggest you do very much cold prospecting at all. But we have to learn the groups. We need to learn what to do and what to say with each one of the groups. And then we need to know what to do after we've prospected. Because prospecting is just that first contact. Then we have to continue with our ongoing follow-up. So we're going to cover all of that, don't worry. We're going to talk about the same thing when we talk about the in-person approach. You've got prospects everywhere. They're in your service department. They're in that orphan owner base. You've got them up and down the street on your way to work. You've got them at the Lions Club, the bowling alley, your church group, where you play tennis, the people at your kids' Little League games. Prospects are everywhere. And it's important to understand that all the prospects, all the people that you and I are going to see out here have a car and they're going to get another one. The only question is who they're going to get it from. We're going to cover some statistics on that too. So we're going to prospect in all those areas. We're going to talk about what to do, what to say. There's going to be a script for everything I ask you to do. I'm going to write out a little simple script, and your workbook is filled with scripts, the things that you need to say. And we're going to talk about the mail-outs and everything else. Then we're going to talk about follow-up. We're going to show you how to lay out an easy-to-use system, not a hard system, an easy-to-use system. It has to be easy to use, or you and I both know we're not going to use it. You wouldn't use it, and I wouldn't use it either. If this thing takes hours and hours a day, it's just too much trouble for most of us. So I'm going to eliminate the trouble. I'm going to eliminate the tough part. And I'm going to show you how to set up and use an easy and very effective system. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is setting up that system. And there's 3 things that you'll use to set up your system. You're going to use a card file, you're going to use a planner, and you're going to use a computer. Now, it's all right if you don't have all those set up, but we're going to talk about how to do it. If you don't know anything about computers, don't worry. I'll explain everything that you're going to need to know. And if you're not very organized, we're going to help you with that part too. We have a lot to cover. Now again, everything that we've covered up to this tape set has been about short-term success. This is the one that controls your long-term success. And in my company, I'm a firm believer in follow-up and prospecting. And I did it as a salesperson. We do it as a company now. We do 91% of our business with repeat customers. And I don't know that I ever want to get that to 100%, because if it was 100%, that means we wouldn't be adding to our customer base. And one of the biggest mistakes I see salespeople make in our industry is that they hit this comfort zone up here. They do some follow-up and prospecting. They get some pretty good customer base going, and then they stop. It's comfortable. It's convenient. It's easy. Now we've gone from 8 or 10 or 12 cars to 15 or 20 cars. Let's don't stop at 20. Let's go to 21. Then let's go to 22. And let's go to 25. Then let's go to 30. We'll talk about some people who have taken this to that next level and selling 50 and 60 and 80 cars a month through effective follow-up and prospecting. You know, if you stop and think about it, if I could just help you get rid of the limits, if you can sell 10 cars, couldn't you sell 11? Of course you could. And if you get to 11, couldn't you sell 12 if you just applied yourself, learned a little bit more? Of course you could. And that doesn't need to stop. Just so you get up to, when you get to 20, that doesn't mean you can't sell 21. When you get to 25, it doesn't mean you couldn't sell 26. Requires more organizational skills. In fact, just treat this as a business. Treat your job as a salesperson in a dealership as a little business. Every little business is going to advertise, every little business is organized, and every little business is out there to be successful. And you want to be successful in your business as a salesperson in the car business. Now we're going to go through this workbook page by page. We're going to go through this just like you're sitting in one of my classes. Now as we go through this, I need you to do a couple of things. I need you to take notes. I leave a few blanks in a workbook to reinforce a point. When you go back and read the workbook with the blanks filled in, it'll be kind of like reading a book on how to follow up and how to prospect. I need you to take some extra notes. Don't talk during these tapes. Please let me do my presentation here. If you talk back and forth, you're going to miss some important points. So when that guy next to you starts acting up, thumping there a couple times, tell him to be quiet. Take good notes. Now, when you're taking a note, write down what that, especially if you're taking it on a separate sheet of paper, write down the page number in the workbook that note applies to. It'll be much easier to find it and put the two back together again later. There's some homework at the end of each one of these. I need you to do your homework. We develop our skills through homework. Homework is that extra repetition and review that we need. And you've got a lot of homework building a customer base, but you only have to do it once. It's kind of like closing. You learn to use those yes questions, those either/or questions. You only have to learn them one time in your life. It's going to take you about 6 weeks to get them down effectively. It'll take you about 6 weeks to develop a follow-up program. But in 6 weeks from now, you should never have to rely on a walk-in customer for your business. You shouldn't have to rely on that walk-in customer for the bulk of your paycheck. You ought to be building most of your business off repeat referrals. If you'll do that, you can grow every single year in sales, and the amount of growth is just going to be based up to you on how much further you want to take your prospecting and follow-up programs. Pull out your workbook. Turn over to page 5 in your workbook. Now, we're going to give you some general information here as we get started. Page 5 in your workbook's a little number, bottom right side of the page. Now, the first thing on page 5, it says, before we get started, let's answer a few quick questions. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about the people in your area, about follow-up, about success, and I'd like you to just check true or false in most of them. If it's true, check it. If it's false, check it. We need to make sure that we're both talking about the same thing. And the reason this is important, a lot of us get to thinking we're in a unique situation somewhere. Well, Joe, over here in our dealership, in our town, dealing with our customers, we're in sort of a unique situation. I think that you'll find that we're all in about the same situation. Yeah, some towns are bigger than others. Some products sell better than others. It's hard to get some of those key products some of the time. I understand that. But we're all faced with pretty much the same thing. So let's go through these step by step. Again, I'm not from your area, so a few questions about the people in your area. Number one there. Except for the people that are too young to drive and the ones that are too old to drive, don't about 95% of the people in your community own a car now or are going to get one soon? Would number one be true or false? Number two. If number one is true, since practically everybody in your community's got one or is going to get one soon, doesn't that make everybody a buyer? You know, we have a real bad habit of when people walk on the lot, we pre-qualify. We decide whether they can buy, whether they can't buy, whether they will buy, or whether they won't buy. You need to realize if number one and number two are true, number three, if number one and two are true, since everybody in our community's got one and is a buyer, the only two questions are when they'll buy it and which salesperson will make the sale. Now, if you spend 10 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes with a person on the lot and they don't buy a car today, do you realize they're going to buy one in the future? I guess the only decision you have to make is, do you want to be the one that sells it to them? You've already invested some of your time, part of the time, or the majority of the time that it takes to build the interest and enthusiasm in your product to get them back in. Now, the only thing that's going to stand between you and that future sale is whether or not you do a little bit of follow-up. And when I say a little bit, this is so simple, it's scary almost. You're going to need to make a couple of phone calls. You're going to need to put a couple of stamps on some pre-printed materials, and you're going to need to put them in the mail. Now, if that sounds like hard work, you need to go do some other kind of job, because that's not hard work, that's easy work. A couple of phone calls, a couple of mail outs to guarantee you a $200 or $300 or $500 voucher in the future. That seems like easy work. I finally realized I don't care when these people are buying, I want the money when they do. And that's easy work. About follow-up, number 4, at the bottom of the page down there. If you don't close and the customer leaves without buying, if you follow up effectively, there's a pretty good chance they'll come back in and buy a car from you. Would that be true or false? If you follow up effectively, there's a pretty good chance they'll come back in. Of course it's true. Now, we're going to talk about the pretty good chance a little later in the presentation. We'll talk about some statistics. Number 5, if you don't close and you don't follow up, unfortunately, statistics prove the customer will buy their car from a salesperson down the street. Again, did you realize that if they don't buy from you, they buy from somebody else? Seems like a lot of people forget that one. And when they buy from somebody else, you did the work, they get the money. And most of you watching this are pretty good. You try pretty hard at your jobs. You know, the people who really need to see this tape set and any training tape set are the ones that need it most, and they're not going to watch it. The people who watch them are generally the best salespeople. And hopefully you're already doing some follow-up. Hopefully you're already doing some prospecting. We're just going to help you do it and become more effective at it. Number 6, if you don't follow up every working prospect, when the customer buys their car down the street, the other salespeople will not spiff me for the referral. Is that true or false? When you do all that work and you don't sell them, and that guy down the street sells them, do they send you a little check in the mail and say, thank you very much, I appreciate you not doing the rest of your job. I appreciate you letting me have that $300 voucher without doing hardly anything. You did the work, they get the money. Number 7, whether I get better at closing or not, if I consistently follow up all my working prospects and sold customers, I'll sell more vehicles each year. If you never learned anything else about closing, if you never learned any more about handling objections we talked about, if you just stayed in touch with all the people who leave without buying, if you stayed in touch with all the people who left and did buy, would you sell more cars down the road? Of course, you couldn't do that and not sell more cars. Number 8, whether I get better at closing or not, if I consistently follow up all my sold customers, I'll sell more cars each year. Of course. Number 9, if I prospected daily and just met 5 new people a day, that would be 25 a week, and that'd be 100 a month. Now, if you prospected daily, met 5 a day, 25 a week, 100 a month, would you sell more cars? Of course. More contacts equal more sales. And if you contact 100 more people, you'll have X number of extra sales. Now, you've got your planners and your tracking. The planners and the tracking are to help you keep up with the number of people you talk to so that you can find your closing ratios and your selling ratios. On the next page, on page 6, let's talk about success in sales, what it takes to become successful. Number 10, would you agree, true or false, if all it took was experience to get better at selling and closing, then a salesperson who started out selling 10 cars a month about 10 years ago should now 10 years later be up to what, 25 or 30? But they usually aren't, are they? It's because it's not experience that makes you successful. It's developing your skills, developing your work habits, keeping your attitude positive, and having an effective customer base. Number 11, did you know that almost all the professionals in sales who earn over $100,000 consistently haven't used an effective follow-up program? I never met a person that makes 100 grand in this business that doesn't have a pretty good follow-up program. And I never met many people that had a really good follow-up program that didn't make quite a bit of money. Follow-up and success go hand in hand in sales. Now, a lot of us used to be, I was a farmer before I started selling cars. I didn't learn any follow-up skills on the farm. Then I was in the Army for about 7 years, and I was a mechanic. They didn't teach me any follow-up skills. I had a little stint there as a bartender while I was trying to find another job, and they didn't teach me any follow-up skills there. I got in the car business, and I wasn't taught any follow-up skills. And because I wasn't taught them, I didn't think it mattered. Follow-up is the secret to success. Number 12, most salespeople only go to the trouble to be average in sales, but they all seem to blame being average on everybody and everything else. Have you noticed that? When you go out there in a little huddle out there, have you noticed the conversation is never, gee, I'm a terrible salesperson and I can't close, I don't follow up, and I hardly give anybody a presentation. Isn't the conversation about, gee, it's not my fault I couldn't sell anything, it's the market, the weather, the economy, my manager, the customers that are showing up, they're all stuck in their trades, they got bad credit. It's never me, it's always them. Average people have learned to blame everybody and everything else. And if you do that, then get used to average wages. When you get tired of average wages, start looking at that person in the mirror and start looking at your follow-up program. About your career in sales up to this point, number 13 here. Even if I didn't learn any more than I know right now about follow-up, if you didn't learn any more than you already know, if you just applied yourself at work, would you sell more cars and make more money? Seriously. If you didn't learn anything about follow-up, if you turned this tape off right now and just went to work and did the things you already know you're supposed to be doing, would you sell more cars and make more money? If you're like the average person in our 3-day class, you just said, well, yeah, of course I would. Number 14, about the hours that you put in at work. Everybody talks about the long hours in sales. Let's actually take a closer look at them. Number 14, I normally spend about how many hours a day in the dealership? First blank there. How many hours a day do you normally spend in the dealership? If you're again like the average salesperson, you just said somewhere around 8, 9, or 10, maybe even have half-day shift where you work. That's 12 hours of profit opportunity. The second half of that, but in real life, I only put in about how many actual hours selling? Take a look at something here on the board. We cover this in our class. We talk about it in our manager's class. We talk about it in our sales class. The average salesperson says that they spend about 9 hours in the place. But when we ask this other question about how many hours do you actually spend working doing something that has to do with selling a car, either presenting and demonstrating to a customer or doing follow-up, the average salesperson says, oh, give or take about 3. Now, if you look at average, this is what the average person puts in. The average person gets out about 10 units a month, and they get out about $30,000 a year for their average 3-hour day job. Now, that makes that a pretty good part-time job, but what if you went ahead and invested the 9 hours of your 9-hour shift? In fact, if you just go to work and you'd spend all of the time that you have scheduled at work working, you wouldn't have to put in all this extra overtime. This is just a math problem. If you work 9 hours and did something productive all 9 hours, you end up with 30, and you end up with about 90,000. But only you can make the change. We've been left, a lot of this has been left up to us, and it's unfortunate. When I started selling cars, I had good work habits until I started selling cars. And then I wasn't required to do anything except stand out there on the lot, wait for something to happen, and I was required to give my manager an excuse when I didn't do what I was supposed to be doing. I spent my 2 or 3 hours a day working, but I spent my 10 or 12 hours a day on the lot because I didn't do anything to equal a sale, so I had to stay longer to get one. And when you get tired of those 10, 12-hour days, start putting in a shift. Get yourself organized, get out there and talk to people, quit hanging around the huddle out here and sell some cars and make some money. Number 15, if I went ahead and applied myself, and you spent these hours that it takes already at work, how many cars could you sell? How many more cars could you sell right now if you just applied yourself? It's one of those questions we ask everybody in our class, and the average person says about 5 more cars if I just applied myself. If I went to the trouble, I could probably do an extra 5 cars. Now, I don't know what your commission is, 250, 300, 400, 500, but basic math tells me that if it's $300 a car, that's about $1,500 a month that you could earn that you aren't getting. Now, we do this month after month after month, and in a 12-month period, basic math tells me that somewhere you just gave up about $18,000. And I don't know if you even realize that. I don't know if you went home and explained that to your wife and kids or your spouse and your children when you went home and it was Christmas time and you said, honey, I can't buy all those presents that we wanted to buy for the kids. I bet you threw in the market, the weather, and the economy. I bet you didn't go home and say, son, I can't buy you that bicycle because Daddy didn't go to work. Daddy didn't prospect, or Mommy didn't follow up, or we just kind of screwed around at work all day. I bet you gave them a reason why you couldn't buy them the nice things at Christmas. I bet you always have that reason why we can't get the nicer car or live in the nicer house. The only reason you can't get the nicer stuff is because you don't go to work. And when you get tired of coming up with excuses for your family or those that depend on you, it's time to take this business serious. You're sitting on a gold mine. Problem is you're just sitting on it. And we have to get out of that. Number 16. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand, if I understand it right, I have to work tomorrow, next month, and for several more years, whether I take advantage of the opportunities I'll have to make more money or whether I just waste those opportunities and the income that I could have had. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you have to work either way? That's one of those really important points that dawned on me when I got out of the car business. I realized that when I go to work every day, I have to either make money or not make money. And I finally realized now that it's a little uncomfortable to do some of the things. I was never an organized person. It was hard for me to get organized and do my follow-up. But I realized that it only takes about 6 weeks to get organized. It only takes about 6 weeks or 90 days to get over the hump. And after that, it's just something you do. You know, it takes a while to develop skills and habits. It takes about 42 days to break a bad habit, about 28 days to create a good one. So if we can get your follow-up program in place and up and running, in about 30 days, you'll have the habit of doing follow-up. So it won't be difficult then. It's only difficult when it's not your habit. Bottom of the page, most important question. You need to answer it. Number 17, I will become a professional in sales and make a lot of money. Or number 17, I will just stay average and blame everybody and everything else. That's a choice. That's a personal choice, and you have to make the decision because it's your career. You're either going to go home with a list of excuses or you're going to go home with a big paycheck. And a big part of that is going to depend on your follow-up and prospecting program. That's going to make your life easier in sales. In fact, let's take a quick look at some facts on the next page, on page 7. Now, we went through those last questions kind of fast, and what I need you to do is after the tape is over, I need you to sit and think about those. Not with the group screwing around, laughing and joking, but I need you to think about these things seriously. This is your career we're talking about. There's a lot of peer pressure in that room. There's a lot of pressure in there not to do good. And in fact, whoever's watching this and he's got that good old negative guy in there that always tries to turn your head, well, don't let it happen. The peer pressure will keep you down. You decide what you want to happen in your career, and then you go do it. And I had to make a decision at the last job I had. Whether I wanted selling cars, I had to decide whether I wanted to go to work and make friends or go to work to make a living. I decided to go ahead and go for the living part. What I found is a lot of those other people in that peer group and that huddle out there that like to screw around all day, is they didn't like me after about 6 weeks because I was in my office doing follow-up. I don't have time to shoot the breeze, read the paper, and talk about who won the ball game anymore. I decided to go ahead and go to work. And again, it's a little uncomfortable if the people at work come in and say, what, you don't like us anymore? I guess that's uncomfortable, but it's more uncomfortable going home with a small paycheck. So again, you have to make some decisions. Let's go over some quick facts that affect follow-up and prospecting. And again, if you've heard some of these on other tapes, that's all right. They're going to be quick reminders. But we need to find out the statistics that lead directly to follow-up and the things that affect us directly with follow-up and prospecting. Number 1 there on page 7, and you've heard this on probably every tape of mine that you've ever heard because it's a really important thing to understand. Number 1, in fact, quick quiz. What % of the people who go out and look at a car or truck buy one? What do you figure, 30, 40, 50, 75, 80? 78% of the people. 78% of the people who go out and look at a car or truck buy one. Okay, now what does that mean? Now, if you're like most people in our classes, the average salesperson tells me on a slow day they talk to 1 person, on a busy day they talk to 5 or 6, on an average day they talk to 3 or 4. Give or take, is that pretty much an average day? Now, you got to count the guy with a toothpick in his mouth, the lady in service, the kid on the skateboard, the other people that said we're just looking, and all those others you count as walk-in customers or ups, whatever you refer to them. Don't you talk to about 3 or 4 people a day? Now, if we're going to do basic math, 4 a day times 25 working days equals, give or take, about 100 people a month that you're talking to. So what's 78% of 100? We'll keep this real simple. Give or take, that's about 78. Now, that's how many are going to buy. Now, most salespeople, and we tend to do this on the spot, the average salesperson sells about how many cars? Give or take. It's about 10. Now that means the average salesperson misses about 68 sales. And again, most of these are instant deliveries. They have to be instant. There might be a few B-backs who just come back in, but most salespeople don't do any follow-up. And that means 68 buyers from all the 100 people that you talked to that month left the lot without buying. There's a lot of profit potential in that number there. Again, assuming though you're willing to do your follow-up. Number 2 down here, the average customer. These people didn't get a very good presentation demonstration. That's why almost all of them left. The average customer tells us they have to go to 4.5 dealerships to buy their car. Now you could interpret that survey as saying they wanted to shop 4.5 places. But if you look at the real statistics, we know about presentations, demonstrations, we talked about them on other tapes. The average salesperson out of every 10 prospects only gives about 4 a presentation and demonstration. And 99% of the people won't buy without a presentation and a demonstration, especially the demonstration. So we've literally forced 6 out of 10 people off the lot. They can't buy. These people don't shop because they want to shop. They shop because they're forced to shop. They didn't get a good presentation here. But now you've lost them. Now the 68 have left. What are you going to do with them? Number 3, 58% of these people are going to go back and buy the same product. Now, give or take, 60, 6 times 6 is about 40 people who are going to go back and buy that product you just showed them. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them aren't going to buy it from you because they're going to have to go to another Ford store and another Ford store and another Ford store. But most of them are buying the same product, and I believe a lot more would if they got more presentations and demonstrations. I have a feeling if you walk out the door and go look at a Ford, you kind of wanted a Ford. Number 4, 90% of the people who do not buy are never contacted again about buying a car. 90% of these people who didn't buy, actually we talked to 100, we sold 10, 90 got off the lot. We didn't do any follow-up or any contact after they left the lot, number 4. Number 5, let me show you why it's important to go ahead and do that. Now, again, we said we talked to 3 or 4 people on an average day. That would be 15 to 20 on an average week. Now, I know you sell some, you write some up. Some are stuck in their trade, some got bad credit, we know all that. Would you agree that at least 9 people a week leave without buying, that didn't go through the system, weren't written up, didn't get their trade appraised, couldn't buy because they had bad credit? Can we agree on a number here so we can have something to work with? At least 9 a week per person? Okay. Number 5, 33% of the people who leave without buying do come back with good follow-up. So if we followed up all 9, 33% will come back in with good follow-up. What's 33% of 9? And I promise you, we're only going to use easy numbers here. 33% of 9, that's 3 per week who'll come back. We'd call those B-backs, or whatever you refer to them as. 33% of the people would come back with good follow-up. But again, the secret is you have to follow up all 9. You can't pre-qualify the people who left and decide who is a buyer and who isn't a buyer. You have to follow up everybody. Number 6, when they do come back in, 67% of the people who do come back in buy the car. Now 67% of 3 is 2. Now that's 2, but that's per week. Remember, we talked to 15 or 20 a week, 9 leave without buying, 3. Oh yeah, it just dawned on me. You don't log 100 people, I forgot. You don't really agree that 20 people come in because your log sheet says 40 or 50, is that right? Didn't you just leave out about half the people? I know why you did too, because I used to log 100. My manager yelled at me because I sold 10, which meant I had a 10% closing ratio. And he said, you better straighten up, we're going to fire you. So I did. I did what you did. I just cut the number. And then he said, okay, you're a lot better now. And I now had a 20% closing ratio. I know this number seems a little skewed because you're not logging all the people. You're only logging the ones you want to count as potential prospects. If you're counting everybody, you'd end up with 2 a week, 4 weeks. Gosh, that's 8 a month. Times $300 a piece. I would call that a gold mine. We're sitting on a gold mine just with unsold prospects. Forget about the sold customers here for a minute. The people who left without buying. You need to understand, they're going to go buy a car and they're going to buy it from you or they're going to buy it from the salesperson down the street. That's a lot of money to give up each month just because follow-up is a little difficult. You know, I watch people not do follow-up, not do the things it takes to become successful in sales because it's too much trouble. It's too much trouble to work for 6 weeks to develop a follow-up program to get this down. They're so afraid of the rejection. And I watch them fail in sales or not make enough money to keep them in the car business. And then I watch them go to truck driving school or something. And they go down the street and they go to school for 6 weeks or 6 months to learn some other profession that's not going to pay them nearly as much. Sales is the highest paying profession in the country, and hardly anybody applies themselves. When you do, you make a ton. When you don't, you get pretty much average wages. Next statistic down here. This one's about appointments, number 7. And we're going to talk about scheduling appointments, making appointments, and how to get names and numbers. But when you schedule an appointment, if you'll just switch the appointment, I'm still going to schedule the appointment. Bob, when's a good time to get together? Saturday morning around 9:30 or 10, or would 11:30 or 12 be better? I'm still going to schedule it on the half hour. He says, well, I'll be in about 11:30. Great. Oh, could we do me a favor there? Could we make that 11:15 instead? The quarter hour will get you 37% more people to respond. Number 7. Appointments scheduled on the quarter hour are 37% more likely to get a customer to come in. I don't know what it is. There's something about that quarter hour that seems like a more definite appointment or more realistic appointment. Another tip, number 8. The more times you repeat the scheduled appointment time, the more times you repeat it before they get off the lot, the more likely they are to show up. It's like the example there says, let's get together at 12:15 on Saturday. Okay, Bob, now write this on the back of my business card. We're going to meet at 12:15 on Saturday. And they're getting ready to leave. A couple seconds later, a couple minutes later, you say, okay, guys, I'm going to see you again at 12:15 Saturday. And would you do me a favor, if there's any reason you can't be here right at 12:15, if you're going to be a little early, a little late, would you do me a favor and give me a call so I can reschedule the rest of my morning there? Now, we just repeated that 4 times. The more often you repeat it, the more likely they are to show up. If you just throw out one little, okay, we'll see you somewhere around 12:30, good luck, they're not coming back. We're going to go to the trouble to give a presentation, a demonstration. We're going to go to the trouble to schedule an appointment. Let's go to just a little bit more trouble to make sure they show up. Number 9, 90% of the people who leave without buying are never contacted again. 90% of the people who do buy the vehicle are never contacted again. Now, that's a shame. It'd be different if we were in a profession and people bought the product one time and said, see ya, we're never buying any of your products again in our lifetime. Then I wouldn't suggest you do follow up. You might send them a little thank you note, but I wouldn't mess with it after that either. The problem is these guys are buying tons of cars in their lifetime. And follow-up is the only thing that's going to get them back in to see you. Now, again, some of the salespeople are doing a pretty decent job at this. What we just gave you was statistics on the salesperson down the street. Your competitor down there is not doing any follow-up. So if they don't do any and you do any, who's most likely to see the customer again? Common sense. Number 10, it's too bad we don't do follow-up. Have you ever thought about what % of the people still buy cars after they buy one from you? Have you ever thought about what % are going to go buy more cars? What % have other family members are going to buy cars? Did you know that 95% are going to buy more cars? Some don't make it to the next driving test. That's true. But almost everybody gets another one. That's the nice thing about the car business. Number 11, and this statistic is absolute proof that follow-up in the car business doesn't work. When we surveyed our customers, 82% of them couldn't even remember their salesperson's name 1 year after the sale. 82%, number 11, couldn't remember their salesperson's name a year after the sale. Now, they didn't say they didn't get that little CSI call that you use to make sure you get a good score, but that's not follow-up. 82% can't remember who we are because our follow-up program isn't repetitive enough. Advertising and follow-up are pretty much the same, and repetition is the key to both of them. One phone call, one little card and letter here and there is not going to get your name on the mantle. You know, it'd be different if they took a picture of us before they left. They blew it up in a little 8x10 glossy and hung it on the mantle there beside their kids, their grandkids. And when people came over, they said, now these are my grandkids and those are my children, and this is Joe, our car salesman. But they don't do that. They don't go to much trouble to remember your name. That's up to you to make sure they do. Number 12. I don't know if you ever knew this. Number 12, prospecting works because 30%, write down 30%, 30% of the people have a family member who's going to trade cars in the next 90 days. Now, in class, everybody doesn't believe that. We were just in a 3-day class the other day. We had about 90 people there. We had 80 people there, including our staff. And I asked a question in class. I said, how many of y'all have a family member who's going to trade cars in the next 90 days? 26 hands went up. 3 times 8 is 24. It was slightly more than 30%. Now, in a group of car people, it's likely that it would be lower because a lot of us still have demos. Now, 26 raised their hand. Now, that was within the next 90 days. I said, how many of y'all have a family member who's going to trade in the next 90 days? 26 hands went up. I said, how many of y'all just traded cars, somebody in your family, in the last 30 days? And 28 hands went up. Over half the group had somebody in their immediate family in a 4-month period who either traded or were going to trade. And that's a lot of profit potential out there. If you don't believe that number, next time you're in a group, next time you're at church, or the next time you're at the Lions Club or the Little League team game out there, when you got a whole group of people, say, could you folks help me a minute before you guys leave? We're doing a little survey down at work. We're just trying to get a gauge of how many people have a family member who's going to trade cars in the next 90 days. You're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked that so many people are going to buy a car without you. And these are people that you also know that already like you, trust you, and respect you. But they're not going to buy from you if they don't know who you are. Number 13, prospecting in the service department works. It works back there because the people already like the place, they're already comfortable, they know where the coffee machine is, where the restrooms are, and they've already seen some of us. So they're sort of kind of comfortable with the sales department at the dealership because they do their service there. Now, the number there is 70%. Over 70% of the people buy or would buy where they have their car serviced because, again, they're already comfortable with the place. That makes the service department an excellent prospecting source. Number 15. Number 15, and it should be number 14. We both know how numbers go. But number 15 in your workbook, prospecting in the body shop is also very effective because over 70% of the people there trade cars when they have a major repair. 70% of the people who have a major repair, whatever that means these days, you know, with cars with these 3 and 5 mile an hour bumpers, seems like a major repair is a 6 mile an hour impact. But major repair, 70% trade within 90 days. I guess it's because the car just never does drive right after that or something like that. Number 16, the bottom of the page. 95% of the salespeople don't do any prospecting and don't do any follow-up. If you do it, you don't have any competition out here. It's not like all the salespeople in the dealership or even work in the service department. It's not like we're hanging around the body shop back there. It's not like we're at the bowling alley running around passing out business cards to everybody. If everybody did prospecting and everybody did a nice job of follow-up, this would be tougher. But they're not. You don't have any competition doing your job out here. I hope the statistics kind of got you thinking there. That 78%, that's a big number. And if you don't like some of those numbers, cut them in half. If that was twice wrong, that'd still mean that 34 buyers got off the lot without us doing a good job. So we've still got a lot of profit potential there too. Let's take a look at who our best prospects are. I'm like you. I would like to talk to the easiest people. I'd like to work with the group that's going to make me the most money. I'd like to work with the group that's not going to grind me as much. I'd like to work with a group that doesn't come in with that price book under their arm. I'd like to talk to people that are fun, easy to talk to, especially if I already know them. Seems like if you went through a day talking to those kind of people, selling cars would be fun. It wouldn't be tough at all. You'd eliminate almost all the grind. On page 9, let's look at who your best prospects are for a sale. Let's look at the types of customers. Now, there on the page, we have walk-in customers. We've got repeat customers, and we've got referrals. And again, you may have seen some of these on some other tapes or series. Now, when we talk about closing ratios, we know that on walk-in customers, if you were actually logging all the people, you've got about a 12 to 15% closing ratio. And when I say closing ratio, I mean over the curb. Writing somebody out doesn't count as a close. That's when I say close, I'm talking about delivery ratio. So we got a delivery ratio of about 12 to 15% with walk-in customers. There's a reason. They don't like you, they don't know you, and they don't trust you. And you have to build all that, and you have to establish it. Now, repeat customer. Some of you guys watching this got a good repeat business. When you get one of them back on the lot, what's your closing ratio? Guy comes back in, he says, Joe, I bought 2 cars from you, need to buy another one. Was it 70, 80, 90%? Go with that low number. Go with about 70%. Referrals, give or take, are about 10% less probably. Joe, my friend bought 3 cars from you. He said, come see you. I ought to be able to close that sale too. Right away, we've got a big difference between the customers. We've got low closing ratios and high closing ratios. When we talk about the different types of customers too, I threw in another key point there a minute ago. This group already likes you. And when we talk about our customer surveys and statistics, 71% of the people who bought said they bought because they liked, trusted, and respected their salesperson. Now, this group doesn't like you. Now, the key word here is yet. The selling process is designed to make them like you, but so far they don't like you. And that means it's not that they dislike you, they just don't like you, don't trust you yet. So they kind of walk on the lot with a chip on their shoulder. They didn't have a lot of fun the last time they bought a car, and you have to prove that you're going to be different than that other salesperson. So you've got some work cut out. Now here, when we talk about these groups, there's some other differences. Which one comes in with that price book under their arm, says, I've shopped on the internet and I've been to 4 places already. I'm going to go with whoever's giving me the best deal. I believe these are the shoppers, the ones that come in and grind you on price. These people, pretty easy, aren't they? Which group do you make the most money on? Which is your highest profit group when you sell them something? We do a little informal tracking in our sales class in our 3-day school, and we find out that this is the group that pays you the most. These people pay you pennies. The average person in our informal tracking program in the 3-day, and we've got different groups of people selling different makes and models, these are worth about an extra $150 a person. That means if you were selling 10 cars and you sold 0 to repeat and referrals, if you just switched from this group to this group, you'd make an extra $150 times 10. That'd be an extra $1,500 a month. Didn't sell any extra cars, didn't develop any extra selling skills, just switched from this group to this group. That seems like a lot of money. Who's the happiest customer when you finally sell them a car? Which one likes you, gives you those great scores on your CSI little surveys there? Here's where the happy ones are. They smile. Here's where these ornery little looks are. They're never happy. They don't like you. They don't like service. They don't like parts. You ripped them off. They're never happy about anything. Well, you get to switch groups. You get to decide which group. Now, in almost all of our tapes and in our classes, we have to focus on how to handle this group because this is your typical customer. That's the customer that almost everybody works with. This customer is good for short-term success. This customer is good for your long-term success. Now, it is true if you dealt with these and you did a nice job and you turned them into long-term buyers with a good follow-up program, that'd be great. Most salespeople don't have a follow-up program, though. Now, we had to label these two groups, and I was going to label one of them least productive. Which would I label least productive? That would be this one, of course. And that means this group is most productive. Now, I know you got some people in the room there probably with very little experience and some with a lot of experience. Those of you just started, maybe you're just starting tomorrow. Which group would it make sense for you to spend your career with? The least productive group or the most productive group? Which group should you spend your time with? The people that are hard to close or the ones that are easy to close? The ones that don't like you or the ones that like you? Common sense would say focus on the most productive group. That's where the money's at. That's where the fun is back in selling. That's where the grind disappears. But if you looked at this, which group of people do you spend most of your time with right now? Haven't we been taught to focus on this group? Isn't that where most of our business comes from? We always kid around about this, but you probably got a full-length mirror in your house. Go stand in front of that full-length mirror and answer that question out loud. Who do you spend most of your time with? Oh, Joe, I spend most of my time with the least productive customer. I like low closing ratios. I love a good grind. I like talking to people that don't like me, know me, or trust me, and I enjoy not making very much money and getting bad CSI scores and the short-term success that goes with it. You know, that doesn't make sense. I don't know why we'd want to do that. Your long-term success and your career depends on working with this group. So if we're going to kind of summarize what we've learned here, we've learned that everybody's buying. We've learned that the competition isn't doing anything to get them back on the lot. And in fact, if we've gone through the other statistics about how we're treated on the lot, we know the competition didn't give them presentations, didn't give them demonstrations, not going to call them back. We know that 93% of them didn't even ask for a name and number before the customer left, much less make an appointment. We know that a lot of salespeople didn't even give them their business card before they left. They didn't need it. Why waste my business card on this guy? He's not coming back. We've learned that hardly anybody is doing anything on the lot to earn their business today. And we've learned that nobody, virtually, is doing anything to earn their business in the future. We just learned that we got two groups of people, tough ones and easy ones. I hope that you see the difference. You got some, a little bit of mini homework after this tape on page 10. After this is over, and I know you already knew a lot of this, and if you've seen some of our other tapes, but I need you to write down the 3 most important things you just got out of this. What were the most important points that we made on this tape? Is it that everybody's buying? Is it that nobody's doing any follow-up? Is it that you've been making excuses instead of going out here and carving out a career? Is it that you've been focusing on the least productive customer? Is it that you went back and told your kids at Christmas time, I'm sorry I couldn't buy anything because the market, the weather, the economy? And you should have been saying because Daddy didn't work smart. Whatever the key points that were made on this tape that pertain to you, jot them down. Your goal should be to get better. The only way you're going to get better is focus on what will work. Now, some of you have got a good follow-up program. You've already got a good start. That's great. We want to talk about how to make it better. On the next tape, let's talk about why follow-up works. Let's talk about the benefits to you. Follow-up and prospecting are your long-term keys to success. Go over what we talked about, have a group discussion, do your homework, write down the 3 most important points, why they're important, and what you're going to do to change those. And I'll see you on the next segment. Until then, you guys have a great day.
That's the end of this tape. Before you